Since taking office, Trump has been on this blitzkrieg, this rapid, intense, and very chaotic, actually, effort to transform the government in so many ways that everything gets shaken up and leaves people shocked and confused. And of course, that means it's leaving the media confused. But there's another side to this. Trump is able to do this because of the media. It's cyclical. The media's failures empower him to do this. I'll explain that today. And the transformative role the media could be playing at this time, should be playing. The best way to think of it involves an ocean and helicopters. I know that sounds like, huh? But I'll make it clear very quickly, I promise. Today on They Stand Corrected, I'm zeroing in on the ultimate example of how the media is failing to do this at this time. Plus,
we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet.
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion.
Trump lied repeatedly in his horrible confrontation at the White House with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, a man who is fighting for democracy. While news agencies are calling out some of Trump's lies in that exchange, they have such a long history of letting Trump and his surrogates lie about so many things that people have learned not to turn to these news agencies for facts. I'll give you examples today of Trump's team lying about Russia's war on Ukraine in interviews with news agencies, which let those lies go uncorrected. Also today, when it comes to slashing the U.S. government, there is a media figure who's doing a relatively good job pointing to what I'll call a tragic comedy of errors. And at the Oscars, the creators of a propaganda film, of course, win an award for documentary. All that and more coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. I'm Josh Levs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact-checks the news. So good to have you here, and so good to have so many new people joining every week. I hope you sign up to get the newsletter, which is free. And one great way to support this show is to choose to become a paid subscriber. If you do, you get additional content. Since I launched the show, I've doubted that many hardcore Trumpists would listen. I'm not talking about people who voted for Trump. Voting for someone does not make you that person followed by the sound ist. What I'm talking about are the people caught up in a cult of personality who are so lost in that they think he can do no wrong. No one should ever feel that way about any person from any political party. But just in case you or someone you know get the rest of their news or the vast majority of their news from staunchly right-wing media, here is a message that you can share with them. Okay, here goes. Hi, I'm Josh. I am a longtime fact checker. I spent 20 years inside the mainstream media, 10 on NPR, 10 on CNN. And since I've stepped out of the media, I'm able to call out the media. I saw during my years on the inside how much of our reporting would not pass the kinds of fact checks that I applied to politicians and pundits. So I am pushing for the media to put truth first. I call out left-wing stuff all the time, and the same thing goes with lies that come from the political right. You might not know it based on the other media you have pulled in, but what's been happening so far with this specific administration truly is a mess. I know you might not think that, but facts exist. And what you'll hear today is that mainstream news organizations are failing to fact check. So you might not even know this if you read or listen to or watch them. I encourage you to listen to They Stand Corrected with an open mind. After all, if you think liberals refuse to listen to facts, then that means you think facts are super important, right? That's what you get here. Facts, not politics. Okay, I hope that message helped. As I was preparing this episode, taking a look at the things that the media is failing to fact check about what the Trump administration is doing, I kept having this image go through my mind. It began with this character in a Disney movie who started a storm in an ocean. So I imagine this administration starting a massive storm in an ocean. And of course, it's not like the waters were smooth before, but this is just so rocky. Everything's rocking. Boats, fishing vessels, cruise ships, offshore rigs, everything. And then I kept imagining the media flying above in helicopters. They're all pointing to different parts of the ocean, and they're screaming, this is happening, pay attention to me. And they're screaming louder and louder in hopes that you will hear them over the din. And meanwhile, some media are in boats in that ocean. All this is so much, so intense, that anyone, for their own peace of mind, needs to look away and be in a calm place. But what if there was a news agency that offered solid ground? A place that gives you a steady, clear look at what's going on, a look at all that craziness, so you can understand it, but not feel that you are getting jostled around in that ocean, all right? Now, to be clear, it's not like Americans are standing on solid ground. This rockiness is affecting all of us. But the media should do its best to give you a place that remains steady through only giving you truth, the hard, solid foundation of truth. One great way for the media to do that would be on a weekend. Like once upon a time, the Sunday newspaper could serve that function. But if you listen to this show, then you know major papers have become so biased and publish so much inaccurate stuff that you have learned you cannot trust them. Well, what about broadcasting? What about a place on the weekend, like on Sundays, for you to get just the facts? Well, unfortunately, that's not the deal either. The biggest way to see that is through the flagship programming of the big news networks, the Sunday political talk shows. These have budgets of millions of dollars, and they are supposed to be the place on the weekend that gives you insight and understanding into what's going on in Washington. But instead, they're tossing you into that ocean. People get on those shows and lie. You get rocked around and have no solidity, no clue what's true. There are 5 big ones: ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox. I decided to go through the Sunday talk shows from a recent Sunday just to show you how lies in support of the Trump administration keep going uncorrected. But yeah, I should have thought that through, because as soon as I went through the transcript of one of them, that one alone gave me more things to correct that would fill an entire episode. That's how bad this is. So for today, I'm going to share parts of 2 of them with you. I didn't want to pick on only one, but just know as we go, this applies to all of them. If you were to watch any of these staples of the news business, you would have no clue what's true. Here's the first one I'll focus on.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history, this is Meet the Press.
This one's from NBC. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen was a guest. He's a Republican from Oklahoma and was there to talk up the Trump administration's talking points and say how great everything is.
What Oklahomans want is to make sure that we get rid of the waste and fraud inside the federal government. And that's exactly what the president's done. They've already identified billions of dollars of waste and fraud for the taxpayers.
But Senator, first of all, they haven't provided proof of fraud, but talk to the people in Oklahoma who've lost their jobs, who say they are hurting.
That was host Kristen Welker, at least mentioning the no proof of fraud. But the bigger claim in there is that they've identified all these billions of dollars of waste. Here he is again in that same interview.
Within only 4 short weeks, we've already identified over $55 billion of waste and fraud.
No, they haven't. And at this point, when this interview took place, there was already a lot of reporting showing that this alleged Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, has no clue what it's cutting or how much money it's actually saving. There was no proof of tens of billions of dollars in waste. But you wouldn't know that from this interview, since lines like that just go completely unchecked. Meanwhile, there are protests going on across the country, including by people who voted for Trump, including in Oklahoma, where this senator is from, saying that the government is dropping crucial programs and cutting people in vital functions that keep the nation safe, like people involved with nuclear weaponry or making sure that life-saving technologies are safe or that our food is safe. Basic things that people pay for with our tax dollars. And at these protests, there are people who have chosen public service instead of the private sector where they often could make more money. Hardworking people who have been working for our country, who are protesting now saying, hey, we've got no explanation, no guidance, nothing. We just lost our jobs after working all these years, and we have to feed our families. So the host asked this senator about those protests.
The chair of the DNC, Ken Martin, openly admitted on MSNBC just yesterday that they were manufacturing these protests. They were busing in armies to manufacture these protests.
No, he didn't. And of course, this was not fact-checked. Think about this. This senator is being interviewed on NBC News, and he makes this claim that the head of the Democratic Party said something on MSNBC, which is part of NBC News, and no one corrects him or challenges him. This is normal. These things are open mic nights to lie, and politicians know that. His bringing us MSNBC there makes this the right time for me to point out something. I have pieced through a lot of coverage, and on the specific issue of the disaster that is this current federal operation, getting rid of so many things without looking into what they even are or what they do or having any understanding. The person I've found so far with the best track record for accuracy on this is not a straight news reporter, but an analyst, a pundit, Rachel Maddow. In this segment, she talked about how the Trump team is failing to meet a very simple court order involving funds for USAID, for international aid, and Trump lawyers couldn't even present an argument in court. No matter where you stand on foreign aid, by the way, the ineptitude of what this administration is doing is undeniable. No one in the private sector who knows what they're doing would rush to hire a team that makes such a mess of things. Anyway, here's Rachel Maddow.
10 minutes after that court order to fix that by tomorrow or be prepared to be in my courtroom testifying under oath as to why you are breaking this lawful order. The New York Times posts this story on how the 5 largest other things they claim to have done to the U.S. government aren't real. And so they've had to take them down off their website and stop claiming that they did them.
That's true. The Times pulled together reporting from other outlets and added its own. Some of this reporting was already out there by the time of the NBC interview that I was just playing you. Here's a little more from Maddow.
An $8 billion cut at ICE, at Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The actual contract in question was worth $8 million. Next, 3 $655 million cuts at USAID. Quote, this was actually a single cut that was erroneously counted 3 times. It's now only listed once at $18 million, so they were off there by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. But wait, there's one more, a $232 million cut at the Social Security Administration, which appears actually, according to reporting from The Intercept, to be worth $560,000.
Meanwhile, while Trump's team was in court for another reason, trying to argue that Elon Musk somehow does not really run this government department, DOGE, Trump himself gave a speech saying that he put Elon in charge of it. This is a bleep show. This brings me to something important about the media. I've explained this before. These days, it is often commentators who do a much better job telling it like it is, because what's supposed to be straight news isn't doing that. I've played for you clips from Sky News Australia. That is part of Rupert Murdoch's right-wing empire. When it comes to the evils of Islamist terrorism and Hamas, Sky News Australia has people who are doing some of the best jobs in the world of stating clearly what is happening, what the facts are, and providing moral clarity, things that the mainstream news refuses to do. So MSNBC is from the left, and with this show, they are doing something similar when it comes to Trump. The problem, of course, is that no agency in any type of medium is currently giving you accurate understandings of everything in all directions at all times. So there is no solid ground. I will mention last week I explained how good it is that Joy Reid's show was canceled by MSNBC. She has been pushing the big lie of the left about Israel and platforming lies constantly. I wrote about this in my newsletter, actually, with the subject line, Don't Weep for Joy. So check it out, joshlevs.com/newsletter. And it's on something called Substack. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Anyway, Rachel Maddow lambasted NBC for dropping Joy Reid's show. I'm not saying that Rachel gets everything right. When it comes to calling out failures on the right, certain figures on the left do well. When it comes to calling out certain failures on the left, like support for Islamist terrorism, Certain figures on the right do well. Meanwhile, what is supposed to be mainstream media is failing to do both consistently and accurately. So of course people have turned away and more are looking at partisan media. By the way, for those of you who may be big Fox viewers, you should know that even Jesse Waters, who constantly parrots Trump's claims, even he called out problems with DOGE, this Department of Government Efficiency. He talked about a veteran he knows who lost his job because he was new at the Pentagon and therefore probationary, and those employees were let go. He doesn't want this kind of thing to happen.
I finally found one person I knew that got DOGE, and it hit me in the heart.
One person, and suddenly he's like, maybe not so much with the way this system is working. Coming up, how the Sunday talk shows are platforming lies about international issues, including a claim about 1.5 million deaths.
And now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, Josh Levs.
We are blessed to be able to have a speaker this evening who speaks with a lot of heart.
An outstanding author, a principled and groundbreaking journalist, a really engaging speaker and thinker.
Broadcaster, journalist, and host of They Stand Corrected, the podcast fact-checking the news. Thank goodness.
Josh spent 20 years reporting for NPR and CNN, where he developed unique expertise on nonpartisan fact-checking. He has been called Truth Seeker in Chief.
Josh has won multiple Peabody Awards, Murrow Awards,
and awards from the AP, from the Society of Professional Journalists, the National Association of Black Journalists, and more.
His book, All In, was published by HarperCollins and won the Nautilus Gold Award for promoting positive social change. He has spoken to the United Nations, Congress, Google.
And of course, I think is very cool, won a debate at Oxford.
He launched his podcast and newsletter called They Stand Corrected to provide listeners with the truth in a world of disinformation.
Clearly, he is a much-needed voice during these crazy times.
It's my pleasure to introduce Josh Levs to you today.
Please welcome.
Please join me in welcoming Josh Levs.
I love getting out there and meeting people like you. It's such a great opportunity to answer your questions and discover more about listeners to this show and potential listeners too. If you're interested in working out something in person or online, there's a form at my website, joshlevs.com. That's JOSHLEVS.com. You'll find a link in the show notes. Just click bookings. President Trump and Vice President Vance had this confrontational meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky, which shocked people around the world. I was not shocked by this. This is the exact posture that Trump always made clear he was going to take toward Ukraine. There are media pointing out that Trump and Vance are refusing to stand for democracy against Russia's aggression. And there also are some fact checks. I played you a clip at the top of Trump claiming that the U.S. has spent $350 billion on that war. There are people correcting that. Here's an example from MSNBC.
He claims $350 billion. The actual number from the Kiel Institute Impartial Observer is $120 billion. He talks about how Europe only spent $100 billion. Actual number, $138 billion. We are number 17 among the countries providing aid when you measure it against our gross domestic product.
But the media has spent so long letting people lie about so many things that audiences, lots of people like you, have learned not to count on the media for truth, not to count on the media for facts plus context. When they fact check something like this, it's like, here's some solid ground that you can stand on for one whole minute, and then we're going to throw you right back into the ocean. It's how I often felt back at CNN when I was on air doing all these fact checks. I knew that I could provide facts in that one moment, but I could not control all these lies that we were allowing to air so much of the time. That fact check I just played for you was part of NBC News. Well, let's go back to Meet the Press, also for NBC News. And this episode took place on the Sunday before that meeting at the White House. In this, Senator Mullen tried to claim that Trump is tough on Russia.
In Syria, He told Russia to stay out of it. In 2017, they went ahead and helped Assad, and they delivered chemical weapons on their own people. What did President Trump do? Within 30 minutes, he kicked Russia out of the airspace and completely destroyed their airfield that they were operating underneath. Russia and Putin fears President Trump.
Hey, remember that one thing that happened 8 years ago? Meanwhile, there's so much to fact check there, like how Trump gave Russia a heads up about its actions, how later that same year, Trump put out a statement together with Putin about Syria. As a Politico headline put it, Trump cedes Syrian post-war planning to Putin. In 2019, Trump announced a change that would mean abandoning the Kurds who had fought alongside our troops. I know this is confusing, and this podcast is not the place to piece through it. I'll put a couple links about it in the newsletter for you. For now, just know that according to NBC News itself, this is a piece from CNBC in 2019, the Kurds were vital in defeating what was called the Islamic State's caliphate, and Trump was abandoning them. Even Republicans, who at that point were always kissing Trump's ring, even some of them suddenly found their spines again and stood up briefly to say how awful that move was. Trump does have a long history of giving Vladimir Putin what he wants. And the incredibly rare times he criticizes Russia, that makes news because it almost never happens, even though Russia is an adversary of the United States, not because of bad relations and an inability to strike deals and get along, but because of what Russia wants. Russia wants to build a new empire, pushing against democracy. That is what makes it a geopolitical foe of the United States. Of course, in this NBC interview, none of that was presented, so you wouldn't know. As I mentioned earlier, this problem does not only apply to NBC.
It's all just ahead on Face the Nation.
That is the CBS Sunday political talk show, which had on Steve Witkoff, Trump's Middle East envoy. He met with Putin at Trump's request. So on this show, Face the Nation, host Margaret Brennan asked him about Russia. Here's something he said.
And what everybody wants, the beginning of that, Margaret, would be a temporary ceasefire, but the long-term goal would be an end to this. We've had close to 1.5 million deaths.
No one has any idea why Trump has been using that figure, and his team repeats it. Sometimes Trump has gone even higher and said millions of people have been killed. Trump has said that Russia lost 1.5 million soldiers. None of the figures available are anywhere near that high. To its credit, Newsweek did a fact-check piece about this, which I'll link to in the newsletter. There is a group called the International Institute for Strategic Studies. They estimated recently that at least 172,000 Russian troops have been killed. As for Ukraine, Zelensky recently estimated 43,000 Ukrainian troops. There is another group that estimates 26,000 civilian Ukrainians have been killed. Most of the civilian deaths are in Ukraine, not in Russia, because it's been Ukraine getting bombarded. Although there are estimates of a few hundred Russian civilians killed. As I always say, do not worry about numbers when you listen to this show, all right? In podcasting and broadcasting in general, numbers are not really helpful. If you want to see these, check out the newsletter. So, what should be an opportunity on Sundays to look at what's going on in Washington and learn facts is instead a mess. The response that the networks usually give is, oh, well, it's live. How are we supposed to fact check anything? Well, who says it has to be live? What if you, shocking idea, I know, pre-recorded interviews and then fact check them in the process of delivering them to people? Just pause along the way and tell them facts. I know. Why would you possibly do that? It may take time and energy. All of that makes this line from Steve Witkoff in that CBS interview all that much more ironic. He tried to claim that the Trump administration works based on what is true.
When you're under a misassumption about facts, you're not going to make decisions correctly.
Coming up, a big lie at the Oscars. Here's a great free way that you can support this show. Thanks to paid partnerships, there are these simple steps that you can take at just about any given time. If you look in the show notes or the newsletter, you will see that sometimes there are websites you can click on to check something out, or free newsletters you can sign up for from other places, or petitions that you might want to sign. I only share ones that I believe in. When you use my unique links to take those steps, a little bit of money comes to the coffers for this show. It makes a huge difference. So if you could take 1 minute to do that, I would appreciate it. In the newsletter that I sent out a couple days before the Oscars, I wrote about the importance of truth anytime someone is given the global stage. When winners accept their awards, what they say reaches people around the world. And when it's something that serves propaganda interests, it's likely to be played and replayed on propaganda networks like Al Jazeera, Qatar's state-owned propaganda network. Speaking the truth about real-life issues at the Oscars is a responsibility, especially when you have been given the title of documentarian, which suggests to people that you actually do your research and are a legit journalist and know what you're talking about. The voters at the Oscars don't know that documentaries are not fact-checked. They just watch these and say what they think of them as films. Well, the voters, of course, gave an award to the creators of a propaganda film that was in the documentary category. And of course, when the winners stepped up to accept their award, they gave their rehearsed lines about it. One of the directors is Palestinian, and he said this nonsense about alleged decades of quote-unquote occupation. Of course, no facts or context in there. Then the Israeli co-director said this.
We live in a regime where I am free under civilian law, and Bassel is under military laws that destroy his life and he cannot control.
He did the same thing when they won a film award in Germany. He strategically avoids mentioning that he lives in Israel and his co-director does not. Now, when this happened in Germany, Berlin's mayor slammed him for his remarks, calling it intolerable relativization. What their alleged documentary is about is a complex issue, which I might deal with in a future episode. Here are a few basics that there's just no way you're seeing in mainstream news coverage of this. There is this block of land that is known by different names around the world. And in many places, it is referred to as the West Bank because Jordan occupied it. I discussed this in episode 1. I also did a two-parter about Jordan. I think that was episode 7 and 8. Anyway, that stretch of land is currently separated into 3 areas. The Palestinian co-director lives in what is referred to in English as Area C. That's an area in which Israel has control, and there are controversial decisions all the time based on all kinds of factors. Who should be allowed to build where? Who is really guilty of stealing land and not stealing land? And lots of other factors like the pay for slave program, in which Palestinians are rewarded financially by the Palestinian Authority for killing civilians. There are lots of factors. Anyway, I pointed out in my newsletter that it's up to Palestinians to fight for rights from the Palestinian Authority. Palestinians in this area where this guy lives do vote in Palestinian elections when those elections actually take place. The Palestinian Authority has not held an election for nearly 20 years. The job of the news is to provide facts plus context. And what they do instead is they just play that clip and tell you nothing. I will put a link about all this into the newsletter in the coming days. So if you have not followed there yet, be sure to. And as always, I want to hear from you. I strategically designed this show so that I avoid social media battles. You can follow me on social media channels. Pretty much everywhere I'm at Josh Levs. When people are nice and friendly, I do interact with you. Everyone who has feedback, tell me things you want covered, things that you think should be covered, things that I'm missing, things you think I got wrong. I would love to do segments called I Stand Corrected. So there are 2 great ways to get in touch with me. The first is if you choose to become a paid subscriber to the newsletter, then you get additional content. Like I teach you how to access just about any news article for free legally, so you don't have to spend money on news agencies that are failing to give you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you choose to become a paid subscriber, you can message me through the newsletter. For anyone, there is a form at my website that is designed to make sure your ideas and feedback get through to me and don't get lost. You can find that at joshlevs.com. As always, thank you so much for listening. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Just click the buttons in your app and take, 30 seconds to give this show 5 stars. And if it offers a space for reviews, like Apple Podcasts has that, type in why you like the show. That's how you get the algorithms to tell everybody else about it. And that's how we can help spread the truth.